They've said it about Gen Z, they said it about millennials, and they said it about boomers, and guess what? They're probably right every single time. I'm your host, Kyle Stoy. In this episode of Rewired Experience Podcast, we're reacting to not one but two videos, one that tries to disprove the lazy generation argument, and then another that accidentally proves it by showing how convenience has quietly replaced discipline in a span of time. As a retired police sergeant and SWAT officer of 12 years and a combat veteran turned entrepreneur, I've lived in high-pressure environments where accountability wasn't optional. And I've watched what happens when comfort takes the wheel. So let's get into it.
This isn't just survival, it's the art of thrive. The rhythm of the heartbeat keeps me alive. It's the Rewired Experience. Breaking chains, turning scars to strength. Rewriting my veins.
Okay, guys, so I got this video from a friend of mine. They actually sent it to me after my episode where I did the tipping culture video, right? And I think a lot of people misconstrued my point that this sort of cultural deterioration as far as getting paid for effort instead of getting paid for time, or sorry, the other way around, getting paid for your time instead of getting paid for effort, meaning they prefer getting paid for their time over their effort. I think what was misconstrued was that's solely unique to one generation, i.e. the newest generation or the youngest generation. And that's not what I meant at all. And I'm hoping to clear up my point today. So this video that was sent to me was a reaction video from, let me look it up here. So it's a reaction video from Ben Askins Official on his Instagram. And he's reacting to another guy's video, and this guy's running down historically that people have always said that the younger generation doesn't want to work or that the younger generation is lazy. So what I want to do is I want to play this video for you guys so that you hear it. There's not much visual to this one. There's a little more visual to the other one that I'm going to cover here in just a second. But let me play this video from Ben Askins Official. Like I said, it's another reaction video where he's reacting to another creator. And I don't know who that creator is. I'd love to give them credit. But one of the things I'll say here is pay attention to how he wraps up the video, his actual reaction to it, because that's really what I want to address here. Not just the timeline that the other creator is laying out, but then also Ben Askins' reaction. So let's take a listen.
Brief history of nobody wants to work anymore. 2024, what has happened to the work ethic in America? Nobody wants to work anymore. 2006, I can't believe the bad luck I've had. Nobody wants to work anymore. 1999, nobody wants to work anymore, Cecil said. They all want to work in front of a computer and make lots of money. 1981, I hired 2 boys to clear the rocks off the land last week, but they just fooled around. They didn't want to work. Nobody wants to work anymore. 1979, nobody wants to work anymore. Disgusted businessman. 1952, I heard somebody say the other day that everybody is getting too darn lazy and nobody wants to work anymore. That's the truth if I ever heard it. 1937. Peach orchardists in York and Adams counties are complaining that nobody wants to work anymore. 1922. The manufacturer and businessmen say it is because nobody wants to work anymore. 1916. The reason for food scarcity is that nobody wants to work as hard as they used to. 1905. Labor is scarce, high, and very unreliable. None want to work for wages. 1894. With all the mines of the country shut down by strikers, what will the poor editor do for coal next winter? It is becoming apparent that nobody wants to work these hard times.
Honestly, I absolutely love that clip. I really, really do. Honestly, any Gen Zs out there, anyone who tells you you're the laziest generation ever or anything like that, just send them that clip. Like, it's absolute classic. Every generation before thinks the next one is lazy. It's just kind of how things work. And there's literal proof of over 130 years showing exactly that. So, of course, Gen Zs are the laziest generation. It's just how working life goes. And honestly, send that clip because I've got a lot of time for it.
Ben, I agree with you on one thing. That's the way it goes, that every generation calls the next one lazy. Because like you said, every generation has called the next generation lazy. And I've did a whole podcast on what lazy actually means. And to me, it just mostly means that you're uninspired. And so let's take that into account here whenever I'm talking about all this. But I do think we're going to bring some clarity to what this timeline actually means, at least what I think. And if you disagree with me, if you agree with me, Leave your comments, call me crazy. People are pretty good at that when they disagree, so that's great. But it's documented some of those were in the 1800s, right? So we're talking hundreds of years documented where one generation is calling the next generation lazy. And Ben Askin's take on it was, right, that this is just the way. They just think that the younger generation is lazy. I'm going to contend that this is probably more of a timeline of every generation getting a little bit more lazy than the next. I think we would be pretty narcissistic, pretty self-absorbed, pretty oblivious, right, to the fact that most things have become easier. And the example that comes to mind for me, and when I say most things, that doesn't apply to everything, but there are some very clear and evident things, I guess, or tasks maybe, that have become extremely easy compared for the next generation, the newer generation, as compared to the older generation. Now, being Gen X, I have a very unique view of this because my grandparents were greatest generation. My parents were boomers. I remember when I wanted to know something, asking my grandpa, and they had this massive bookshelf of Encyclopedia Britannicas. And I would say, hey, Grandpa, what's the answer to this? Or I'd have a question about something random, and he'd go check the encyclopedias. Today, it's Google. It's ChatGPT. The information is so easy to obtain. And I would argue probably less reliable because what goes into developing a website versus publishing an encyclopedia in those times, extremely different. And so I think the effort that went into verifying that information was much more reliable. Although I think there's some transparency in what we do now that if we're smart with it, we could probably find more information than we could then. And so there's a nuance here. And so I just want to address it. There's definitely a dichotomy. There's a balance in what I'm talking about. And so hopefully I'll address most of that. But the insight here to me is just because something is said often, that doesn't mean that it's false. Meaning we've heard this said all the way through time. Maybe it's just documenting the history of the fact that it's true, right? Maybe the older generation being disgruntled and upset that the younger generation doesn't want to work. And maybe they're noticing something. And maybe that was true for every previous generation. So I think my point here is that this is actually a timeline that reveals a slow generational decline in work ethic. Now, my point that I'm going to make with this next video is that it's enabled by increasing convenience, kind of like the story I just told about the encyclopedias. So have you ever felt like things are getting easier, but you're not really moving forward? And what I mean by that is there's more modern conveniences, but that doesn't necessarily mean that your life is moving forward like it's easier, right? So you're still feeling trapped in the rat race, even though more tools for knowledge, for leverage, for scale are at your disposal. And so chew on that for a second, and then we'll get into this next video to add some context to what I think is really going on here. Okay, so this next video is actually courtesy of Paramount Pictures. It is an episode of the show 1923, and from the Yellowstone series. That, first of all, great series overall when you're looking at the history of kind of the development of Western civilization. Love them all. I've watched a lot of them. Haven't had time to binge watch them all, but I think it's a pretty entertaining show and then has some historical value, if you will. But this is a scene, again, courtesy of Paramount Pictures. Don't come at me. I don't intend on monetizing, so this goes viral. This is purely for educational purposes because I couldn't find like another clip of this that wasn't just really chopped up and with other commentaries in it. But they're walking through the street of Bozeman, Montana, and they come across this guy that is selling refrigerators and washing machines. Okay. And so this is the conversation that ensues. So let's check this one out.
So, are you selling electricity in the valley?
Yes, ma'am. We'll run the cable as they pave the road to the park.
See that paving the road to the park?
All the way from Canada to Mexico.
What is that?
That's a washing machine.
What does it wash?
Clothes.
Can you imagine?
An electric motor spins the cylinder as water is pumped through the machine. Soap is added here, and the agitation removes any soiling.
What does that wash?
That's a refrigerator. Top compartment keeps food frozen. And the bottom compartment maintains a temperature of 38 degrees.
And you sell these?
We rent them.
So you sell electricity, and then you rent all the things that need electricity?
More or less.
We don't need any of these things.
Well, the conveniences. Their use gives you time to do other things.
What other things?
Well, like other chores.
So you invent machines to do those, then what do we do?
Go on a picnic. Go for a swim. Go to the cinema. You can enjoy a more leisurely life.
It ain't more leisurely, because we gotta work more to pay for all this stuff.
He's got you there.
This is the future. Every home in New York City has electricity. They have
So, modern conveniences, right? What do I do with that extra time? He says, then you can focus on other chores until you invent something that does those chores for me. You think about that from like a farming and ranching perspective, right? Eventually tractors instead of horses, the different conveniences that we add into our lives through modern technology and mechanical advancements, right? Scientific discoveries, all these things that we do really well because we are creators by nature. But what we do with that time is the difference. One of the things that was telling in that for me is he was looking at it from the perspective of, what do I do, right? You're just going to make more machines to replace me in terms of those chores. And if you look at historically, he's right. But the other thing was whenever he said, once those chores are taken care of, then what do I do? And the guy was like, relax, right? And I think we've reached that point. We have so many modern conveniences and so many things are done for us, in some ways done more efficiently, that we think the only way to create, the only way to get better is to kick back, right? To relax. And this has become our definition of self-care, is to chill, take it easy. Go to the spa. And he was saying, go for a swim. And we're saying, go to the spa, go get your nails did, go get your hair did. And I'm not picking on you ladies. Guys do the same things, right? Go to the golf course, like watch football all day on Sunday instead of moving ourselves forward. So leveraging these modern day advancements, I think, to do more, to be a little bit more efficient, to contribute more, to invest our time wisely versus wasting our time. Not that relaxation isn't needed. It is. That's why we sleep. Get a good full night's rest, right? That's super important. But what I'm saying is the pioneers in 1923, they resisted the modern conveniences because they feared losing ownership of their own labor. Because ownership of their own labor translated into freedom. And what I'll talk about later is that freedom is directly correlated with accountability. And when we lose accountability, meaning we're not accountable for what we produce anymore, and now we're just consuming, then we lose our freedom, we lose our liberty. And they knew that. They were connected to that in so many ways that we aren't anymore. And one of the things he said is, if we rent the machine, then we work for you. So now I'm doing all this work. Even these machines are doing this work just so I can pay you back. And if you look at that now, and we're paying the banks back, we're paying our credit cards, we're paying debts with our time. And so did we really gain freedom by becoming more efficient in this way? And I would say we could have, but I think we started investing that margin of time in the wrong way. The Duttons really did everything manually, right? They were cleaning, preserving, they were surviving without electricity, without these modern machines or these modern conveniences, because they definitely, like I said, they understood that convenience was a trade, right? Not a gift. Trading that convenience was exactly that. It was a trade-off. Early Americans instinctively knew, because of what they'd been exposed to or were just a couple generations removed from in terms of tyranny or being ruled by a crown, that outsourcing effort could mean also outsourcing their freedom. So what we want to take away is that every convenience comes with a choice. You can use it to do more. You can use it to produce more, to be more productive, to learn more, or you could do nothing. You can waste time. You can create margin with your time, with those conveniences, with those modern advancements, to leverage, to scale, or you can just waste it. And that's, I think we've gone in the wrong direction with the decisions we made, because things get so easy. Not that every generation is harder on the next generation. They probably are, but for good reason, because they're just witnessing it in real time is all that it is. So when I'm seeing it with the generation after me, I'm just witnessing it in real time. Just like my grandparents witnessed it in real time with my parents and with my generation. And so they're just exposed to how that decline or deterioration has happened over time. And so that's what they're vocalizing. They're not saying you're just lazier because you're the younger generation. What they're saying is that all these modern conveniences and you're not leveraging your time in a way that really shows appreciation for those opportunities. We're becoming more unaccountable for our time and how we invest it. And then we're just not leveraging these advancements to turn them into opportunities. We're leveraging them to waste our time. The truth isn't that every generation is wrong when they say the next one is lazy. It's that every generation is progressively becoming more comfortable, and comfort without accountability leads to decay. So this is the main takeaway for you on this whole piece right here. Convenience is supposed to create margin, but margin without purpose just becomes Netflix. It becomes DoorDash. It becomes scrolling social media. It becomes over leveraging AI, or not even leveraging, but abusing AI to do it for you instead of just to make it better. From washing machines and fridges to smartphones, internet, artificial intelligence. And some are using that tech to scale, and then others are using it to escape. AI is today's washing machine, right? So are you going to use it to multiply your impact or to avoid that extra effort? That's the same choice that they had with washing machines and refrigerators. And that was the exact conversation that we listened to in that clip. So another point here to take away is this: entrepreneurs leverage tools to create. The unaccountable use them to consume. And I'm going to go into a little bit of the difference, the kind of the contrast of what it means to be accountable and unaccountable here in just a second. So stay with me. I'm going to talk about that in just a second. But the real divide, it isn't rich versus poor. It is 100% accountable versus unaccountable. And we're told that it's a lot of different things. We're told that it has to do with socioeconomic status, and that's a piece of it. We're told that it has to do with maybe race or gender or some of these outside factors that are largely outside of our control. But the reality is that we are in control of this decision, because being accountable or being unaccountable, regardless of your socioeconomic position, because there are people who are very wealthy in both of those categories. And there are people who are not wealthy who are also in both of those categories. So it doesn't really have anything to do with, again, your socioeconomic status. There's people of all races and there's people of all genders that are in both of those categories. So what does it really mean to be accountable or unaccountable? Okay, so typically, I'm going to simplify it a little bit. And this is really watering it down a bit, but I think you'll get the picture here, right? And so if you have two categories, accountable versus unaccountable, right? I think people that I would put in the accountable category are people who are like commissioned earners, right? People who are paid for their efforts, their contribution versus just their time. Now, maybe they're taking a piece of their income through trading time for money as a traditional employee, but they may have a side gig, right? Those people, in my mind, are more accountable. And the reason they're more accountable is because they're going above and beyond in the sense that their contribution is higher than their consumption. And so I'll expand on that a little bit more. But in the unaccountable category, then I would throw most wage earners. Like I said, not all, but these are people who are clocking in and clocking out, but then also clocking in and clocking out mentally, meaning they go to work, they punch the clock, they do their time, and then they go home and they're checked out. That's when they're watching Netflix. That's when they are scrolling social media. Now there's, like I said, you've got the accountable that are going home and they're maybe building their dream. They're chasing another purpose. Maybe they're facilitating that job to build something greater, but that's not their primary purpose. They are building something else. Even a person that's on a clock that's working is still consuming. They're consuming a system that was created by somebody else, by a system creator that now employs them, and they get the blessing of earning money from that system that was created by someone who is accountable. And so these people that are not just working a job, but they're also mentally checking out and not really moving towards anything greater than that. And that could be education, it could be self-education, could be, like I said, building a side gig or a business or saving with that side gig. The other category or the other type of people that I would put in this accountable class are builders. They're building something. And that's what I was saying, is even these people that are in a 9-to-5 job maybe, or maybe an entry-level job, working at a restaurant or whatever, if they're not just going home and checking out and watching Netflix, smoking weed, hanging out with their friends, drinking whatever, and they're actually working towards something bigger than themselves, maybe they're even working multiple jobs or multiple side gigs to try to build this purpose, those people are what I would call builders. They're accountable, right? That's very different. These creators are the people that build systems that others, the consumers, can work within here. We've got builders, and then in the unaccountable area, we've got consumers. So are you a builder or are you a consumer? And so hopefully that's clear in what I'm saying here. These builders are what create opportunities even for these consumers. The people that aren't really going to do anything else but work 9 to 5, consume whatever others create, and just be stuck in the rat race, right? And not really look to better themselves to do much of anything. If you will, and hope on YouTube, I'll throw up a graphic where you guys can see this side by side, but the entrepreneurs are going to be in that accountable category, right? Because again, they're system builders. Now, this one might trigger some people, but I also think retirees and pensioners who are not doing anything else, because I am a retiree. I have a couple retirements. I have a pension, right? But I'm also now building a business. So I'm using that margin in time that was created through my 9 to 5. The businesses I have now are not my first startup, and they will not be my last. And so I've done that before, and I'm going to continue to try and fail and build and buy and sell and do the things that I'm doing to build. I could just sit back at this point in my life and probably relax, right? Not build much of anything. I could probably just sit back and consume as a retiree or as a pensioner, right? As a person on a pension. And so that's what I mean. It's not all retirees. Now, there's some retirees that use their time to go out and serve in the community, right? They go out and they engage in philanthropy, donating their time through charity organizations, and some even form their own nonprofits. And they definitely fall into that accountable class, not the unaccountable. But I would say generally people that retire and then don't do much of anything but retire, they are the unaccountable class. And some of those are very wealthy. And that's what I mean. You don't have to be poor to be unaccountable. You can be very wealthy, and I would argue those are the worst kinds of unaccountable people. Those are the people that they have the money to leverage their financial position in an unethical way, which makes them more unaccountable. And some do that. Some leverage those positions in unethical ways. Now, we've seen that in the government. We've seen that in corporations. We've seen that in every institution that's in existence. But one of the other categories is, and this is a big one for me, you've got leaders that are accountable, and then you've got complainers that are unaccountable. And we all know these people. They've got nothing good to say about any system that either serves them or doesn't serve them. They just want to complain about how it's not working, but yet they're not really taking the opportunity to get involved. And I've found myself falling into this category before. And if you ever feel powerless, it's probably because you're not plugged in. You're not contributing. And I think one of the most frustrating things is oftentimes when people feel like they're being like ruled over or controlled by the unaccountable. And then our tendency is just to go, if you can't beat them, join them, kind of just give into it. But really, the only way to affect change is to be a leader. And to be accountable means to be purpose-driven, not comfort-seeking. That is probably the most poignant way to delineate these categories in my mind. The clearest way for me to think of it is purpose-driven, so people that seek discomfort, and then people who seek comfort. Like that's their primary purpose is how can I be comfortable? Those people are unaccountable. So just to recap, this is what I want you to take away from this. Accountability isn't about income. It's about ownership, right? You can be totally broke and be accountable. You can be rich and be unaccountable, right? You can be wealthy and still be very unaccountable because you are abusing your comfort. Efficiency increases with visibility because comfort thrives in darkness. Now, why is that an important point? The reason is because people that are unaccountable, and I think we've seen this recently in the government bureaucracy a little bit, right? Like they're using some antiquated systems. I can tell you as a person who has worked within the system or as a patient within the system of the VA, this is the case. There's a lot of people that are awesome and they're well-intentioned and they want to help. They're also being stifled by an unaccountable system because there's many people around them that are not doing what they should be doing, even at a minimum. And they're completely unaccountable in the system. And I think we're starting to realize that, and we're starting to use modern technology to evaluate, right? Like some of these systems that are antiquated, that don't allow for radical transparency and therefore more accountability, right? Transparency is so important because again, comfort thrives in darkness. When nobody's paying attention to you and nobody's evaluating your performance, right? Nobody expects anything of you. That's why your circle of influence is so important, because people that expect better of you, that comfort can't thrive. Comfort's like a cancer, right? And if we create an environment where that cancer can't live, and that's by feeding your mind with productive things, with podcasts like this, with books on personal development, growing that growth mindset. And yes, that's done in community. That's why we have Rewired Experience School community, where people are lifting each other up, right? Like calling each other up, not just calling each other out, and listening to each other's journeys, sharing our knowledge and our breakthroughs with each other on some of our calls and things that we do in that community. And it's completely free, guys. If you want to go join that, I highly recommend, if this is relating to you, or even if it's not, if it's challenging you and you're like, I disagree with this, go into the community and see what's really happening, because you definitely are going to fall into the trap of unaccountability at some point. And if you're in that spot right now and you feel stuck, then this is the community for you, I promise. So to wrap it up, yeah, maybe every generation says the next one is lazy, but instead of proving them wrong, what if we're proving them right for the right reasons, right? What if we're proving them right? So yeah, maybe every generation says the next is lazy, but maybe instead of pushing back against that and being offended, truly evaluate. Am I a consumer, or am I truly being a creator and contributor to using the gifts that have been given to me in the most responsible way? And when I say gifts, those modern conveniences, right? And right now we're in a place where AI is that thing, right? And so are you using it to scale and to leverage and to get better, or are you using it just to make life easier for yourself? Because I think if you're doing the latter, then you definitely fall into that lazier generation category. And you're on the verge of, if you're not already, being totally unaccountable for the time that you are now wasting because of this additional convenience that you have from people that came before you and created it. And you can feel however you want about it. But the reality is you've got a responsibility here to use it in the best way possible for positive change, for more accountability. So how do you use it to help others be more accountable also? I'm going to work on becoming the best version of me for you. You work on becoming the best version of you for me. We're going to be responsible with our time and build together. And then maybe that next generation won't be looked at as every younger generation has been looked at in the past. Maybe we can flip that a little bit. Maybe with just one generation, we flip it a little bit, right? Let's use our conveniences to serve more, to grow more, and to become more. And if you're in agreement with this, again, I invite you, number one, go over to rewiredexperience.com. You can join our community there. There's a lot of people in that community working on exactly this, becoming more accountable to each other and focusing on becoming the best version of themselves. But if you're digging the video and you just want to keep on consuming more for now until you're ready to dive into some bigger concepts, maybe you're not convinced that this is the right way of thinking, watch the other video that YouTube is recommending here, okay? And I think that you'll continue to get more value. This is my way of giving back. This is my way of being accountable. Our community is totally free. We've got a great team of coaches that are in that community that are pouring into others for nothing. And that's what's crazy about it, is we really are leveraging technology to give back and to build. There's absolutely some things that we do charge for, but that's not one of them. So that one's completely free to use. So I appreciate your time today. And man, if you are feeling pressed by this message, I'd encourage you to lean into it. But if you think maybe somebody else would like to hear it, it always helps if you like, if you subscribe, and then share with somebody else. But until then, take a knee, drink water, reshoot your azimuth, and Charlie Mike.